Okay, here we go. Well, that's wrong. Sorry. Oh, where'd it go? Sorry, give me just a moment. I'm going to pause the recording again. My apologies for that.
Doing great.
Looks good, Teresa. You can see it all.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to wait about a minute longer. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Proactive Advocacy Summit hosted by the WMEA. Just to give you a quick background on this summit, the purpose of this advocacy event is to support Wisconsin music educators with the tools and resources that will actively support critical local conversations about student needs, allocation, scheduling, and resources for the 21-22 school year and beyond. I'm Brad Schneider. I am the chair of the WMEA Advocacy Chair Advocacy Committee, and I'll be serving as moderator tonight. Tonight's session is being recorded, so just be aware of that. If we could move ahead to slide 3, I'd like to have everyone introduce themselves in the order. Carolyn Atwell will be joining us in a little bit. And then if we could just go to the next person, introduce.
Hello, I'm Lizzie Chakowski and I'm with Brass Bell Music Store.
I'm Amy Meyer. I teach 4K to 8th grade general music at Indian Community School in Franklin.
I am Katie Prahota and I teach middle school band in Toma.
I'm Layla Sonier. I live in Verona, taught for 38 years, orchestra and music composition, retiring 5 years ago.
And I'm Brad Schneider. I've already mentioned my role in WMEA. I was a band instructor at Middleton High School for 3 decades.
I'm not sure that Justin is on yet, but I'm Jackie Thering. I teach elementary orchestra in New Berlin.
Is Kristen? Well, Kristen is with us, but I'm not sure what's going on. So, okay, in the next slide, we would love a little information from you. Why are you attending tonight? Notice it is check every box that pertains. It's multiple choice. Okay. If we could see the results, that would be kind of fun. We have a lot of great minds with us tonight. Yes. And we're going to do a couple of these polls tonight. So be ready for different questions. What we're facing. This is from Arts Are Education. If you want to go to the next slide, please. The 3 main areas that we have concerns about when I've talked to colleagues statewide: budget shortfalls. This was especially bad in April and May of 2020. Interesting enough, the WMEA spent some large amounts of time with legislators last week, and the legislators are actually feeling better about Wisconsin's budget situation. Focus on remediation. We have heard of school districts that are lengthening time for, say, language arts, and it's being balanced on the music schedule. And then the continued need for personalized PPE, specialized PPE for music instruction. Where is that money coming from? Who is paying for that? In some cases, it's federal CARES money. In other cases, it's different. So if we could go to the next slide, we have 3 keynote speakers that are going to address this from different perspectives. I will introduce Laurie Fellens, who is no stranger to many of you. She wears many hats for us. She is the executive director of the WMEA and also the WSMA, and unknown to other people, she's also the executive director of the Foundation for School Music. And she's on the ground floor with people on the Colorado Boulder aerosol study, among other things. So Laurie, welcome, and please take it away.
Thank you. Could we advance the slide 2 more, please? Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to be here with you tonight and talk a little bit about the mitigation planning in the classroom and just bring you some key points and some up-to-date information that was just released on the 12th of February, just to make sure everyone's got good, solid information about where we are as a state and then also nationally, some of what is going on with mitigation. If we can advance to the next slide, before I go into that, I wanted to just mention Wisconsin Music Strong if you're not familiar with it. Wisconsin Music Strong was formed in April, May of last year as a response to the pandemic and COVID-19. And this was an effort to bring together the voices of music businesses, so a lot of our retailer and manufacturer businesses, as well as other arts organizations that share a common mission around music education so that we could work together. In July, we put out a letter to school administrators about the value and importance of music education, continuing even if it needed to look a little bit different this year with in-person hybrid or even completely virtual, as many of you've been. And the other thing that we do is we continue to meet to talk about how we might support you with conversations that are upcoming into the next year. So if you haven't visited Wisconsin Music Strong, the website is there for you. So tonight I want to just talk about 3 pieces before I go into some recommendations. One is a reminder that in Wisconsin, curricular decisions are made at the district and local level. So one of the things we see in Wisconsin is different decisions, even in school districts that can be right next to each other geographically, and especially over county lines. Another thing I just want to mention up front that I want to be really transparent about is that currently the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, as part of the governor's mask mandate, states that masks with slits are in violation of the governor's mask mandate. It's important to just put that information out there. Going back to point 1, though, there are curricular decisions at the local level where that advisement may or may not be in play, but it's really important then that school districts are following the science, which is what we're going to talk just a little bit about here in a moment, is to make sure that we're following the science around wind instrument playing when we are making those choices. And then finally, a reminder that in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction also has music and arts education guidance that we want to take under advisement when we are making those local decisions. So I want to start first with what is found in that aerosol study. So there has been a study, fabulous international aerosol study coming out of Colorado, primarily University of Boulder. And I'm trying to truncate some of my information tonight to keep it in the 10-12 minutes. So I highly encourage you to go learn more about the study at the link. We'll be putting the link to the slide deck in the chat a bit later. But in that study, we're at round 3, and what you need to know is it's pre-press ready right now in peer review. What that means is that the research is done and it's ready to be published, but it's got to go through a pre-press and peer review process in order to actually be published. So we consider it finite and done. And so what it says really strongly is that administrators should make decisions about restarting playing and singing in collaboration with local, tribal, and health officials. And this should be based on a number of factors. The critical piece here when you're talking with your school administrator is making sure that you're having those really good conversations about what's happening at your local level. 1, you need to know about your current level of community transmission as you're making decisions, because we can go in and out of the recommendations making sense or not. You also want to know where you are with case numbers identified among students, teachers, or staff. You want to know what other indicators your local or tribal public health officials are seeing. And then finally, you want to know a lot about how student, teacher, and staff cohorts are being implemented in your school. So what does that look like and how are people being grouped? So as it continues to say in the study, as with most activities, singing and playing wind and brass instruments does generate respiratory droplets, which I'm sure we're all aware of. there are aerosols and they may contain COVID-19. So to also keep in mind that the research doesn't say we prevent any spread, it means we minimize as many risk factors as possible. What has been found across the study is that the aerosol rates among performing arts activities are approximately the same for research purposes, except everyone's favorite, the oboe. The oboe is demonstrating higher amounts of generated aerosol. That's one thing to keep in mind, is that the oboe does have some other considerations. I want to then go through the 4 areas that I think are key for you to attend to. The first is masks. We'll go on to the next slide, please. So masks need to be worn by everyone. And what this slide also talks about is the materials that those masks should be made out of. So what you want to be making sure of is that you have well-fitting masks made of the materials that the scientific studies have shown are more effective. Just wearing a mask is not the same as wearing one of the masks that's been tested. So you'll be getting a copy of this and you can go ahead and research that, but the types of masks are listed on there, well-fitting, correct materials. The second thing is social distancing, which can't be, represented enough here. Using masks, but then not social distancing does not provide the same amount of lowering of risk. So you want to make sure, as we've all continued to hear, that you are 6 by 6 feet minimum apart in the music room, and if more, if possible, is good. There was also early statements around trombones being 9 by 6. Again, it's about using the space that you have and making really good decisions. Linked in this, when you get the deck, is also the list of order of preference for where you would actually hold a class. So where is your classroom located? Nothing still beats outdoors. And when you can be outdoors or in an open space environment or under a tent, that's preferable to indoors. Obviously, we live in a climate where that's not really possible right now, but keep in mind that when and if you're able right now to be outdoors, that's something to think about. And then make sure your outdoor classrooms are also safe from other risk factors when you're using them. When you're indoors, you really want to attend to your ventilation, which is one of the next points. But when you move indoors, then there's a whole nother section of things to really consider. If the class is there, you've got to make sure you have optimized flow rate and filtration and that you're working with your school personnel on that. You want to consider having teachers use a portable amplifier to keep your voices as low as at the conversational volume as possible. And especially with the masks on, that's really something to consider when you're talking about protective equipment. That's not just the mask, but it's also potentially requesting a way to support you with amplification. And then remembering to not only limit the number of students in the classroom, but students move around. So paying attention to those storage and backspace stage areas as well before and during and after classroom activities, or if you're working with them outside of the school day. So then some really music specific things to make sure that you have in place. First of all, just develop plans to communicate with students regarding what you expect in music classes. I know that seems really simplistic, but making sure you have that clear plan, and it's also a great thing to share with your administrator and with families. What are those expectations? When possible, create cohorts for learning. This really helps you with both your school tracking protocols as well as actually even learning. It can really be of great support. So consider creating those cohorts. You want to limit sharing any materials right now that you can. So in other words, take all materials that a student touches or uses. Where can you create efficiencies so that they have their own access to materials? You want to use disposable absorbent pads or other receptacles to catch as much of that spit and aerosol coming out. The aerosols when it goes into the air, but you do have that spit to deal with. And you want to make sure you're discarding and cleaning properly after each use. And then we already talked about that. You think about holding your activities virtually or outdoors when possible. That just really also helps cut down on contact and risk. One thing that's not on the slide is also that real importance that you clear the aerosols in the room about every 30 minutes. So you also want to make sure that you're adding that space in between the activities. So the last set of things I want to point out to you, it's not to go into these, it's to tell you that it's critical that you're familiar with material. One is all of the International Performing Arts Aerosol Study information, and then also the 2 documents that'll be linked in the slide deck that DPI has put out around infection control and their school considerations. Just make sure that you're familiar with that information. The next slide, though, talks about the 2 things that just came out. And I want to just point both of these things out to you because they're important. The first is the Stay Safe Minnesota document. It was actually released on the same day as the CDC document. They've done an excellent job in Minnesota of putting some things in place. It's shared as a sample reference because not all items here are applicable yet in Wisconsin, but I think the way the information is organized is extremely useful. And then the other thing is the CDC released an update on February 12th. There's a couple critical pieces of information for you to know about this. There's a question in there that reads, when you dig through sort of through the layers, how should administrators handle music, choir, band, and performing arts classes? If you go on to the next set of slides, what is really important to know, and I just confirmed this with James Weaver, the head of who's been running this aerosol study, this is actually old advice. So although it came out in their new update, the science has a few things that are different that I just want to point out. This first slide is pretty much fine. But when we go to the next slide, there's a couple of things. One is the part about the using bags. There's still references in some of the links to the idea of using bags. Right now, bell covers and masks with slits remained through all phases, but they've really gotten away from that. So if you're continuing to use those, that's one thing to look at. The other is the transparent shields and physical barriers. Some of them are actually messing with the aerosol disbursement. So you want to really think about if you're using any of those plexiglass or barriers that came out in the first round. It's been shown through the 3 stages that maybe that needs to be relooked at. If you want more information on that, you can reach out to me after this event. And then finally, this last part here where it talks about those design bags and also some of the guiding principles that are there for youth sports and playing sports. Some of those have also been shifting in real time. The aerosol study team is trying to work with the CDC to get this updated. So I just wanted to point it out, and I had told James I would just pass that along, that there are a few things that are different, even though this is considered the guiding the guidance from CDC at this time. I'm going to just close with 3 points. One is to remind you again that curricular decisions are made at the district level. So all of what I reminded you of tonight, it's super important you're talking to your administrators and you're making your decisions at your local level. Make sure your tribal and health departments are involved with that decision making because they hold the best, most current information as things change. And then remember, we are here, Wmea, the other state associations, Wisconsin School Music Association, and Wisconsin Music Strong to support you. If you're having issues and you want to talk through them, please reach out to us. So thank you for letting me share that with you tonight. And I'm going to pass it back to Brad so he can introduce the next speaker.
Okay, our next speaker is a string orchestra specialist, but has been president of our Wmea, president of the North Central Division of NAFME, and a very knowledgeable person with advocacy. So I turn it over to Layla Sanya. Layla, you need to unmute.
Let's start again. Thank you, Brad. So many things that we just heard would have been considered very shocking even a year ago. And things have changed and things will still change, but I think we'll see that many things will stay the same, and I'm going to speak about some of them. Here are a couple of questions for us to consider. We could go back a slide, please. How do we advocate without thinking about it? Is this even possible? How does our philosophy about the role of music ed in a well-rounded education for every child guide our everyday work? How do we know that everything we do with and for students is an act of advocacy? And finally, how do we advocate while thinking about it? Do we take advantage of opportunities to speak with stakeholders, parents, students, administration, colleagues, school board members, community, and legislators? In some cases, this may just be about peripheral topics, but always positive before negative, unless you're in a crisis situation. Next slide, please. So some of you will have seen this before. It's been going around for a while, developed for a while. And what I think we need to be aware of is that there's a traditional way, one of the most traditional disciplines in the school is still in the music classroom. And we've kind of grown from the left side of this slide to the right side. We no longer just think in terms of a podium. We no longer think of ourselves in terms of entertainment. We no longer think of what we provide with students and for students as being extracurricular or even co-curricular. And the emphasis on competition and extrinsic rewards has been dulled in recent years for the best, I think. Performance is not, as I mentioned, entertainment, and we make really strong attempts not to align ourselves with extracurricular and athletics. So onward to a student-centered curriculum, study of music that results in understanding, academic study that is necessary for every child, emphasis on collaboration and intrinsic responses, and a variety of assessments that include concerts. In other words, we're not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but we found ways to articulate what is important about music education that necessitates a change in philosophy. Next slide, please. So when we choose words to describe what we do, and words are powerful, even now words are powerful, we need to think about aligning with other academic areas. Notice I said other. Allow the curriculum to develop and move forward, not just to look back, not just to look at what we have done, but what are we going to do? What are students going to do? Clearly connect to our mission as music teachers and supporters, speak to the future and dreams of the students. And this doesn't mean just doing what they like, but actually thinking about where they're going to be in 20 years or in 10 years. Give the students the most rich and personal experiences possible. And I think all of you have done an amazing job this year of making that happen in a difficult environment. Connect to the culture of the audience and consumer being the student, and thereby convince others about the value of music education. Next slide, please. So I've chosen words, and you can choose your own. The words on the left are words that probably look familiar and maybe even comforting at this point to you. Some of it hasn't really existed in a form that we're used to this year, but they're all words that are still in there and could be used again when we come back into classrooms with our students. I'd like to recommend that we shift to the words on the right, which are much more curricular in nature, which align better with the rest of what is happening in school, which take the focus from the teacher at least somewhat and put it much more on students. So we're angling toward a student-centered classroom, and which make the whole environment be much more collaborative and about study. Next slide, please. Take a minute to just read these two paragraphs. Because it's more difficult to change your language and change your vocabulary when you're speaking, I would recommend that you first, if you haven't done much with this, that you first focus on it in your writing. And if you read these two paragraphs to yourself, I'm sure if we could all speak together today, you would respond with the fact that the first one on the left is more teacher focused, and the one on the right is more student focused. So when we are writing for students and other teachers and administrators, the paragraph on the right, even if it's a little bit sort of high-minded in a way, you can use your own style. It's much better in terms of getting people to listen to you, buy into what you're doing, and it should match what's actually happening in the classroom. Next slide, please. So in 2015, something really wonderful happened for all schools, for all kids in this country, and that is the ESSA change in the Every Student Succeeds Act from the earlier language that was more tuned into No Child Left Behind. If I'm sure all of you have seen this, music is part of a well-rounded education, and that still exists. It doesn't matter that you've been virtual or hybrid or, you know, in school, out of school, not able to do some things, people upset, everything. It doesn't matter. We're still asked in federal law to provide a well-rounded education, which includes music. And next slide, please. That means that the words core academic subjects are stricken. They're stricken from federal law. This is going to take a while because people are so used to using the word core that it makes it hard to let go of some old language, but you can help them. If somebody says core, you can say, do you mean well-rounded? You can ask a question back. So I would like to suggest that if you try in your speaking to change one or two words, maybe stop referring to yourself as a director, or maybe you want to refer to the classroom as, or curriculum rather than to the group. The thing that I'm trying to get people to change right now is the word program. And the reason I'm working on program is because it's not used in school very much. It's used in athletics, it's used in extracurriculars. It's not used in school all that much. And it also usually is preceded by the word my. So since we don't really want to promote our ownership over everything, because if you own it and it's cut, then the sort of subconscious feeling is that you are the only one being cut, that you are the only thing that's important. If you say the program or the classroom, the curriculum, you're speaking for students, and that can never be wrong, putting students at the middle. So I would suggest trying one of these and making that shift, because it will make a difference, even in these times of crisis, even when you're worried about budgets and you're worried about relationships with others in the school district. Take I and my out of what you're saying. In my opinion, this is the single most important thing we can do as music educators to help our students get a well-rounded education. So there's so much more to consider here, but I had my 10 minutes. So I would like to suggest that if you're having some specific issues, or if you just like to talk through some of this and get some ideas how you can gain some strength and how you can speak truth, please listen to later on in this, so you can sign up for some help, and I'll be happy to call you or reach out to you, and we can chat a little bit. But thanks for listening, and we'll move on.
Hi, guys. Before we introduce our third keynote speaker, we'd like you to take a quick poll that will inform that speaker. So, the other thing we'd like you to do when you get a chance, if you could put into the chat your name, where you teach, and what you teach, it would help us know who we are reaching. Okay, could we see the results of this poll, please? Interesting. Which one is in red? Okay, thank you. Our third keynote speaker is the WMEA administrator position on our board, or on our council. She is the assistant superintendent of the Kimberly schools, and her name is Holly Prass. Thank you. Take it away, Holly.
Good evening, everybody. And I'm just so impressed with all of the information that Layla and Laurie were able to share. That is incredibly valuable, especially for what I'm about to say. And hopefully it helps inform some of those discussions with administrators. Before I started, I was trying to think of a couple of stories that maybe would help you understand what administrators are going through right now, because we've all had challenging times, but being in the administrative seat is very lonely. We don't have a lot of colleagues, and especially inside of our districts. We tend to rely on connecting with people that are in our area and outside. But also, this is new for everyone. There's no playbook, and as you've all experienced. But one of the stories I thought I would tell is this summer, I tried to take a day off just to breathe for a moment. And normally in summer, it's very fluid. We take most of our vacation then. There was no downtime this summer. And when I came back, the entire product I had worked on with the music people had to be thrown away and start over because information changed that quickly. And so I know that Laurie alluded to the changes in the study, and that's just part of our new normal, is making sure that we can be flexible to move through all of those changes as they happen, because they are vast and they are quick. They're slowing down a little bit, which is good. But then the other thing is just a reality gut check for all of us, because administrators are faced with people who are terrified to walk into a building because they are afraid they're going to die. And they are also faced with an equal amount of people who think everything is stupid and it is their right to not have to do any mitigation at all. And we're trying to do a very delicate balance of understanding that all those people exist in our organization, and the decisions that we make can literally lead to someone's untimely death if we choose incorrectly. So never has there been more of a life and death situation put in front of us as a whole. And we have to attend to that. So while you're advocating for your program, I was trying to think about what are the pillars upon which you should advocate with your administrators. And I did come up with 3. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. It was hard for me because I was a music teacher, and our district is so strong in advocating for music. We believe it is vital to the development of children, and wholeheartedly what Layla was talking about with the whole child. And so I had to put my hat on of somebody who maybe didn't have quite as much enthusiasm for the arts. And so advocating for kids, as Layla was saying, is the first place to go. And if you're used to speaking in that language about the value to students, what we realized in this pandemic is that music was the place students went to belong. And we pulled that out from under them in so many ways, and it affected their social emotional health. And we have seen suicide rates, depression rates, anxiety rates go up in kids because they didn't have those things. Sometimes athletics, sometimes art, sometimes music, whatever it was. But music was a major factor in those kids' lives that they lost. And so that is a huge talking point of advocating for just being involved in it in and of itself. The second thing is to really listen first and understand where they are in the decision-making process, where they are in the conversation, what decisions have been made, and if they're ready to hear, because there's nothing worse than somebody coming in with something really important to say and not being able to be heard because something else is on the table. And I'll tell you, this year I have dealt with more crises than I ever have before. So I think it's just a strange year all the way around. And so making sure that it's the right timing is important. And then the third thing is play the long game on this one, because right now it may feel like some things are taking a backseat, and I'll get into a couple specifics on the next slide. But be that team player, be the person next to your administrator advocating for how can we help, because in the long run, that only plays in our favor to both you and to your programs. So if you can move to the next slide, I'm going to go over a couple of them that were in the overall focus of this meeting today. We've talked a lot about COVID. It truly affects everything. There's not one day that goes by that I am not dealing with COVID in some way, shape, or form. And it affects every aspect of the music program. And as I go through these next 3 areas, it's a major part of what you have to consider. With scheduling and facilities, what's important to know is that every piece of real estate is vital, because when we're trying to keep 6 feet of distance, We just don't have the space for the numbers of kids. Our buildings, we know that our class sizes in our gen eds were generally running in the 30s for the most part in the state. And our rooms cannot fit 30 at a comfortable 6-foot distance. So what does this mean for you? Well, it means that our bigger spaces are a hot commodity. And so offering up your room and recognizing that helping in this instance is going to be an important thing when you have the chance to do so. Laurie touched on maybe having to modify your programming to do smaller ensembles if your district is allowing playing, but being really flexible about that space. We've even had to move some of our classes into the largest spaces, into indoor training facilities, into the gym, into the auditorium, so that we can spread out. And so be part of that complex puzzle solving versus being somebody who's an obstacle, because your rooms are going to be important in how you fix the problems your total building is facing. The next area is budgeting and allocations. And I know that Brad said that was good news, which it is good news, that we're going to collect the taxes that we thought we were going to collect. And then the income side, it's going to be very positive. But I think what the legislators are warning us of is that money's spent. So we're not going to see the increases that we'd maybe been promised. And I think there's a myth out there that COVID is saving us money in education. Personally, in our district, we had to spend $3.3 million to get up and running. And we've been open 5 days a week, all grade levels, all year since the beginning of the year. It took money to do that, just like it took money to get kids to do 100% online education because of all the supplies that had to be purchased, all the Wi-Fi that had to be run. This is not cheap. And so while the state budget is promising, there are haves and have-nots in this conversation, and there are new pots of money with ESSER that are coming out, but that's allocated by the formula of the title funds. So that means if you are an affluent district, that money will not go to you, or at least will go to you in a very small way, versus a high poverty district, which may get more of the money, but who knows how districts will spend that. The other thing is that the latest state money that's been allocated was a $66 million pot of money that's going to be allocated, weighted heavily to those districts who have been in person. And so you may see your districts pushing to get in person before a lot of things are ready. That's part of the reason, because there's funding to be had there, and it will be allocated prorated based on the time that you have been in person doing education. So yes, we are optimistic about budget, but it also is really, really tight. So that leads me to my third area, which is retention in the musical programs. And one of the most important things you can do is advocate for the fact that your programs historically have been strong. They have been where those students have gone for their social emotional health. They have been important to your district. So rely on the history of the program to help them understand how you're going to work to rebuild it. And anybody who's rebuilt a program knows it takes time. I personally think we're going to see this bounce back pretty quickly because kids are so eager to get in and be active again. I hope that I'm right, but if not, helping administrators understand that affording you the time to rebuild that program is going to be important, and that enrollment-driven decisions in this first year may not be the wisest decisions because it can be detrimental to the program down the road. The other thing is that many of our missions and visions include music, whole child, well-rounded, some of the things that Layla was saying. Remind them of that. Remind them that this is part of what we do. It is the very core and the soul of our districts. And so it's important to protect it and to grow it. And again, you need patience, time, and support to do so. So overall, my message is to seek first to understand and know the right time for the conversation, and realize that COVID influences everything. Be as flexible as you can and be that team player for your administrators, because in the long run, they will appreciate you and they will appreciate it, and hopefully be a strong advocate for you in return. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. If you want to, I would like to give our attendees a quick tour of the Wmea advocacy pages. Shout out to Paul Booty, who organized a subcommittee of us last summer to rewrite these entirely. If you could go to the next slide and get us in, please. Okay, if you go to, this is the Advocacy tab, and if you go to the Advocacy Resources next, along the left there, yes, please. Okay, and let's just look at this for just a moment. There are specific advocacy COVID-19 things, notably COVID-19 talking points for speaking with school administrators. That is I read through that today. It's really good. Position statements for the WMEA. If you look down in the second grouping, advocacy guidelines for music educators, basic advocacy guidelines for teachers, full of great ideas. One of which is proactive advocacy is so much easier than reactive advocacy. However, the second one, practical guidelines in the event of emergencies or proposed reductions. Could you open that one, please? This is reactive advocacy, and you can see, we'll scroll down just very briefly. In the event of proposed reductions, there's general suggestions. If a specific grade was being targeted, say fifth grade band, they want to cut the starts band in sixth grade. There are reasons for the proposal, and then there are counter arguments. Here's reduced student access to specialists in the elementary. Again, reasons and counter arguments. So these are super practical and so valuable. And if you are experiencing these and have not gone on into the WMEA advocacy resources, you're missing a great wealth of ideas, strategies, and techniques to try. Okay, that's the end of my little commercial. If you haven't yet entered in the chat your name, where you teach, and what you teach, please do so. And I will pass this on to Brass Bell Music Outreach Resource Person Extraordinaire, Lizzie Chakowski.
Thanks, Brad. Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzie. As he mentioned, I'm with Brass Bell Music Store, and I'm here today because we all know that we can get you your music supplies and instruments and things like that, but not everyone knows that music stores can also be utilized as an advocacy partner. I can speak for our partners across the state, the other retailers across the state, that right now, more than ever, we're all trying to stay on our top game to really find resources that we can share with our teachers. So if we can jump to the next slide. I only have one slide. I want to keep it brief so that we can focus on all of the information we have today. But I did want to say that in addition to the obvious resources we could provide, we always want to be available to give you support at the state, local, and even federal level. I know a lot of NAM members like to advocate for music at our nation's capital, at our state capital, but also at board meetings, also by voting at our local polls. And so your voice is really important in what we have to say there. We know that sometimes going to do that is not an option for whatever reason, that you have agreements with your school, things like that, but we want to be able to make sure that information is heard. So please always feel like you can reach out to any retailer. Of course, you can reach out to Brass Bell, but I know that you can reach out to your local retailers as well. So many of them are involved in that Wisconsin Music Strong organization that Laurie had mentioned at the beginning, and we are trying to get even more on board because we know that it's important to them. Also, we are aware that recruitment is probably really heavy on your minds right now, and so please feel like you can get creative with your local music store. I know that we've been bouncing a lot of ideas with some of our retail friends on how can we help teachers get that not only get new students, but also retain the students that they have as we're going into another unique school year. So if you have ideas, if you need support, retailers are really willing to get creative right now in person and online. Other resources that we've been trying to gather is information on how to get Title IV funding, to get other kind of funding for you on the state, local level, how to get partnerships for you through different organizations to support your program. And obviously you can get instruments and supplies at your local music store, but a lot of them also have connections with programs that take donated instruments and refurbish them and get them in the hands of students who maybe can't afford them. I'm sure that's a even bigger concern this year with some of the struggles families are having. So if you have students that are in that situation, I definitely encourage you to vocalize that to your local retailer, because again, everyone's getting so creative and we want to make sure that music can happen no matter what. And then finally, I know that every local music store loves to spread the word and support your work by just highlighting it with success stories, sharing your concerts on social media. If we can help with press releases, if we can help create connections with other teachers and help you start a new program or bring to fruition a idea that you had because we know that another teacher has done it. We just are really wanting to be that that resource to you. So if you have any questions, of course you can chat me, you can email me, but please keep in mind that your retailer really wants to help right now, and you shouldn't be afraid to reach out to any of them. All right, thank you. Oh, sorry, next person. I got all excited here. The next person is Will Jansen. And so he's going to talk about speaking the truth with a lot of grace. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Lizzie. And thanks, Brass Bell. You guys provide a lot of support for our educators. Well, I'm going to speak briefly, and if they go to the next slide, if you're in the slide deck at all, which Laurie has made as a link that you can access, you can go ahead and open the document that I shared. I would stop listening to me if I were you and just look at the document. Just know that when we created it, it was meant to be a Mount Horeb in-house sort of thing. I am one of the music educators in Mount Horeb, and we didn't create this with the thought that we would share this generally, but we have with a few districts and people have found it helpful. So just know it's there. Steal anything you want. That's what I would do if I were you. And anything that's useless, just disregard. So I called this Speak Truth with a lot of grace because I think we need to be honest about where we are and where we're headed. And I think we're all in a better mental health place if we are honest. And we have to sort of imagine now what our new future looks like as our friends in healthcare and science get us out of this COVID time and back into something that might look more like what we're used to. And I think among the things you need to speak truth to is yourself. I mean, be honest, we're right now in the midst of the biggest action research project that has ever happened in the history of education. Here we are all trying things the best we can. Nobody wrote a research paper first and tried some things and said, okay, now let's make the whole country do this. So we have to be honest that we're all trying a whole new way of teaching. Some of it's working and some of it just frankly isn't, but we've got to be honest about it and learn from both our successes and our mistakes. And I think if we can own that a little bit, it makes it easier for us to figure out how we move forward. And in the document that I shared, one of the things we really tried to identify are what are the aspects of the music program that students really identified with that are positive, and what are the things that they are desperately missing. And that social emotional part that Ms. Prast mentioned in her presentation is certainly a key part of that that's really obviously difficult to duplicate. No matter what your setting is right now, nobody is sort of in normal. So that's really important. And we can't blame ourselves, but we do need to be honest with ourselves about what's working and what's not. And by doing that, I think we'll help ourselves move forward. The second thing is, I think you need to speak truth to kids. For the kids who have stuck with you through this, when it doesn't look like what they imagined, I hope that you share your appreciation for their resilience and their willingness to hang with it. I have a number of times just said to kids, no matter how it's going, I am so appreciative that you're willing to stick at this, to help recognize that resilience that they're showing. And for the kids who are like, wow, this is just so not like what I want, to say to them, I get it. It's not what I want either, but it's what we have. But I think to give them the grace to say, I want you back when it looks better. I think you'll feel good about yourself, and they will too. If you say you have a home here, there will always be a place for you. When you get to a place where what we're doing looks more like what you want, you of course are welcome back. And that will be part of how you move forward with your program. But to do that so that they know that they have a place to come back to. If nothing else, I always look at students who leave and go, that could be a future school board member. Let's make sure they leave our program with something positive. Third thing, I think you need to speak truth and grace with your administrative partners, as Ms. Prass said. In our district, we have already had meetings with our administrators, and we started by saying, is there a time we could meet with you to talk for a little bit about our program? We want to talk about some concerns we have and some plans we have for moving forward. And we were really honest with them about things we're concerned about, because I don't want them coming to me saying, hey, I have concerns about your program. I want to seem proactive that we're aware and we have some plans for moving forward. And I think as long as you can share some outlines of plans, they can be there to support you and to give you a sense of, in the bigger school community, yes, that's going to work. That's going to be a great thing. Or, hey, you need to know there's some other things that are impacting that you will want to be aware of to work with. So having a plan and being reasonable, I think, are important. And the fourth group you need to speak truth to, I think, are your colleagues. Because I think you and your colleagues, your music education group, which might be you might be it, in which case you got to find a partner. Maybe it's the arts teacher. But you and your partners need to work together to say, we are going to make it through this. We're going to have a better place when we get to the other end. And we're going to help our school and our community get there, because we're going to do it together. I put some specifics in that document about like how we're going to deal with a whole group of beginners who never started because it didn't seem right. And we're going to try to approach them this spring. So we're actually going to have multiple beginner groups happening this summer. Things like that are really specific. How we're going to reach out to kids who quit and we want them back. But the last thing I would leave to you is that no one in your district knows those students better than you do. No one else works with them for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in a row. So no one's better equipped to advocate for them than you are. So I hope you'll give yourself the grace to do the best you can and know that better times are coming and that you are doing your best by them. And I hope it works out well for you. If there's anything in the document you want to use, feel free to have at it. I'm going to turn it over to Allison Yeager. Allison is a music educator in the Oregon School District.
Thanks, Will. I'm Allison Yeager, and I'm currently at Oregon High School. And I'd like to talk about keeping students at the center of anything that you're speaking about or proposing or advocating for. This isn't necessarily different than what has already been spoken about, but reinforces those concepts by building on another type of practical application of student-centered progressive educational language. I appreciate also that Superintendent Prass brought up the point about the when, and January, February is a great time to look ahead to the future and start those conversations, submit proposals, because allocation decisions are typically being solidified by early March. So my focus tonight is on my small group learning journey as a music educator and advocating for small group learning, as it really has been the cornerstone of student success, especially in the distance learning format, in keeping students active as musicians. So I actually got the opportunity to start my career in Madison at Thomas Jefferson Middle School, in a fantastic school, but also very budget strapped. And so I was able to create a proposal to get 6th grade small groups happening at that school, and then moved on to Oregon Middle School. And I spent 8 years there trying to build up allocation for small group learning from a 1.0 all the way to now it's at a 1.74 over 8 years. And then I moved to the high school. So I changed positions in the middle of a pandemic, changed buildings, same district, which is great. But now I'm advocating for small group learning at the high school, which had not existed before. So my journey has kind of had a similar thread. But what we found when we were trying to figure out, okay, this schedule for 2020 in the fall, I had to sit down with our administrators and explain to them how crucial small groups had been to student learning while I was at the middle school, and how especially many students thrived in that situation, some with IEPs and 504s. Their ability to continue growth and creativity on their instrument, and building relationships in smaller settings with students and staff. So if you could go to the next slide, please. One of the things that when you're trying to start these conversations, one of the things that's really important is to consider, do you have a mission or vision statement? Does your school have a theory of action? That's relatively new edu-speak in the last 5 to 10 years here for a theory of action, but essentially it's a framework by which your school or district judges every single thing that they do, whether it's food service or music education curriculum, or anything having to do with even transportation. Is it advancing the theory of action? What are the problems that we have? How can we make it better? So we created a mission and vision statement several years ago that we feel solidifies what we're trying to advocate for students. And so when we write a proposal or we're having administrative conversations, we can come right back and look at this mission vision statement and say, how does this work for kids? What do we need to do to help promote student learning? Even better, if your school does have a theory of action, try to find places that you can link what you're trying to advocate for students to your theory of action. For example, at Oregon High School, one of ours is leverage student strengths while also giving each student what they need: equitable opportunities, feedback, and individual academic and social emotional supports. That is music education, right? We hear that and we think music education does those things for students. It leverages their strengths, social emotional supports, individual academic progress, small group learning, right? So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So some of the things that I focused on and we focus on as a music department when we're trying to stay student-centered is, what do they need, right? Not what do you need as an educator for allocation in your music department, or not what a position needs, but what do students need? And really, they need equitable access to high-quality curriculum, comprehensive curriculum, dual curriculum, right? So focus on the curriculum and what students are able to access. And it doesn't have to do with numbers, right? High quality curriculum isn't just about numbers. It's about the quality of instruction. And also when you're thinking about, oh, thanks for dropping that in the chat, Laurie. When you're thinking about talking about access, right? You can use resources like DPI recommendations, research, Wmea advocacy resources as well, to tie in what you're looking for as far as high quality curriculum. Students need personalization, they need autonomy, they need a sense of growth and competency. This is not new, right? There's research tied to this with student learning. So focusing, how can I advance student learning by personalization? How can I help students achieve competency? And you can talk about all of those things in regard to your proposal. And then, so you're all here because you're caring educators, right? You're here for that purpose. You want to help students have access to high quality music education. But administrators love solution-focused educators, right? Just as Will also presented in his document, having a thoughtful, student-centered proposal, and if possible, a crafted model of what it will look like for students will help advance what you're actually advocating for. Unified music department support also helps. Another quick example is when we had to go to this flipped schedule for students to still be able to play from home when we got back in person. We didn't wait for the admin to just say, this is the schedule we're doing, fit yourself into it. We sought out that meeting, discussed the challenge, and then as a music department, we crafted that scheduled product that would work for students. And then we went from there, right? So we initiated those conversations, but we built a model. And because we built that model, it took some of the work off of the admin's plate. And they were able to say, that looks good to us, right? Or if it needed to be tweaked. And if we could move to the next slide, we can talk about visible learning. This is also not news. Visible learning is what we typically do in music education. We do concerts and we do talk to our parents and we do talk to our stakeholders about what we do in the classroom. It's a little bit different now, right? So promoting student learning and growth publicly whenever possible is really quite powerful. Using district social media outlets to make that happen is something that we've experienced success with in Oregon. Inviting administrators to your classroom on a day where you feel that you've got something really great to share with them, that they can see students in action. What are they working on? How are they showing visible learning? Hosting a collaborative classroom visit where other teachers in your building who aren't necessarily music teachers can come and see what your students are engaged in is also very powerful, or instructional rounds. So we're experiencing the same pandemic as everyone else, right? And I think it's important to note that the proposals that we draw up for what students need in Oregon, it's not different from what students needed in Madison, right? We were able to, as long as we're keeping students at the center, you can at least have a good place to start from. So we have to try to move forward if we can, and just like Will said, the best we can. So using student-centered progressive educational language will give you that great foundation to start from. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions about starting your own proposals. I'm here and happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, Lizzie, and Will for sharing unique perspectives. We are now moving on into the participant questions part. If you have a question, and I'm going to preface this, if it's a specific detail to your district that our panel might not be able to speak to because it's a particularly difficult administrator or colleague situation, that is going to be difficult for us to address. If it's a little more general question, we can do that. But I do want to put a plug out on the very first page of the WMEA homepage. There is a box or a article that says advocacy response assistance. And there is a team of people, colleagues of yours, that are there as resources for specifics. And it's right on the homepage of wmeamusic.org. So as you're typing a few questions into the chat, I'm going to do one of the ones we got in advance. And Will, this is one that you mentioned you might be able to at least get the ball rolling on. My students have already signed up for classes next year. What strategies do you recommend to try to encourage students, families to return to the music program?
Well, as you think about next fall, whether you're a middle school or a high school person doing band, choir, orchestra, who's going to be in your program in the fall that was there for a whole year the last time you had a regular program? If you're a middle school teacher, no one next fall likely was in your 6th, 7th, or 8th grade band the last time you did 6th, 7th, or 8th grade choir, like a whole year of it. And in the high school, it'll be the seniors. When they were freshmen, they had a whole year of just regular school. So one of the things that we did is we created, because I am no tech person, it's really low tech. I created just basically a slideshow and then did Screencast-O-Matic. But we talked through what we anticipate a year looking like here's what we envision. If you're part of this program, these are the sorts of educational experiences you're going to get to be part of over the course of a year. And we created the video. I think the video is 8-9 minutes. It's as low tech as you can imagine, but that video got sent to the parent of every student in grades 8, 9, 10, and 11 who are thinking they might be in band next year, to say to those people, this is what you would be part of if we're kind of back to normal, so that both kids and families had an expectation of, oh, because they haven't seen that group function like a regular group for a long time. Our last regular public event was in December of 2019. We were 1 week away from a whole series of March events that all just got nixed. So anyway, that would be my suggestion, is no one knows that program like you do and what you envision those experiences being like for kids. And if you can put that together and share that with kids and families, that will help them have that same vision. So that would be a suggestion that I would have to move forward.
Anyone else like to add to that? Okay, I will read another question, and then Laurie, if you want to, I'll read one more from the advanced questions, and maybe we can add one from the chat then. Here's a question. I am a new teacher that just started my first job less than a month ago. I've found so far that the community and administration are very supportive of music, as they haven't had a full-time music teacher for some time. However, I'm wondering if you had any advice on how to best promote the program, how to encourage kids to stay in the program once it becomes an elective.
So I can speak to this one a little bit. In Toma, we feel that we do a really good job with both recruiting and then retention. So a few things that we do for recruiting is all 3 band directors in the district are extremely visible at all times. So for example, there's a fall review concert that our high school marching band does, and their dress rehearsal is actually a concert put on for every single elementary school student in our district. And there are 7 elementary schools. So they're all bused to the high school gym. The high schoolers get to play for all these really pumped up elementary school kids, and it also serves as their dress rehearsal. So like small children all over will recognize the high school band teacher. I saw you at that one thing. Even though they don't necessarily know his name, they can associate him with the band, and I want to be in the band. Another thing that we do is all 3 band directors, we call it the tour de schools. We tour all 7 elementary schools in the spring, and we visit every 5th grade classroom, and we test the students out for instruments. So we get them hyped up about band, like, you're going to have me as your band teacher next year. What instrument do you want to play? And then they get the chance to physically try out all the instruments. Obviously, that's going to look a little different this year because of COVID. But this is something you can even do with your music stores. Like Lizzie was talking about working with the stores to do recruiting. So we actually work with 2 music stores out of La Crosse, and we spread out our tour to schools over 2 days. One day, one of the music stores comes with us. They provide people to help us test the instruments. They provide all the instruments for us. The next day, it's the other music store. So just by getting out and being visible, the kids start to make that connection of, oh, you're that band teacher that I saw. I want to be in band because you came to my classroom and you made it sound super fun. And then something I do as I'm teaching, I'm just super visible in the school. So we have morning hallway duty, and I literally stand in the hallway with my mug of coffee on non-COVID years, and I just talk to the kids as they come into school. And a lot of band kids talk to me, but I also form relationships with a lot of non-band kids. And a lot of times those non-band kids will even say, man, you're really cool. I wish I would have joined band. So by connecting with those students, I know something about every single student that's in the band program. I can talk to them about the Lego set that they just got and sent me a picture of over Microsoft Teams. I know that so-and-so is in Arizona right now because her parents have a house there. Just getting to know your students and making connections with those students, they're going to feel valued. And when they feel valued, they're going to want to be in your classroom. If their math teacher doesn't make them feel the same way, well, they have to be in math. But if you can make them feel valued and a part of your classroom, regardless of what you teach, they're going to want to be in that classroom. They're going to enjoy music, and they're going to want to stay in. One last thing, the high school band teacher in our district is really good about building a brand. He's like crazy obsessed with building the Toma Band's brand. And just a simple thing that is super effective is we have official Toma Band swag. And it's just simple t-shirts that he's designed on custom ink. T-shirts are like 10 bucks, sweatshirts like 25 bucks. And we just give the order forms to the kids. It's just, if you want some, buy some. It's not required. It's not part of a uniform. It's amazing how many kids then wear that shirt to school, or they'll give it to their grandparents. And I'll see people in Walmart wearing a Toma Band sweatshirt. I'm like, I don't even know who you are, but you're wearing a Toma Band sweatshirt. I don't know how you got this. So just by getting that out there, people will see it. Like my dad has a Toma Band sweatshirt that he literally wears all the time. He lives 2.5 hours north of me, but he wears it all the time. He's repping for Toma. So just a simple thing you can do to just build your brand, so to speak, so that you are more visible to people that maybe don't even know who the band teachers are or aren't familiar with your music program. So just a couple of ideas that we've done in Toma.
And I'll jump on there too. Something that we do at the elementary level to embed advocacy within the school is at the culmination of our solo ensemble unit, students perform on tour around school for a classroom, and students get to see those instruments played up close and center and ask questions. This year we'll be doing our tour via Google Meet. So students still get that authentic performance opportunity, and students around the school get to see the orchestra members perform and learn more about being in orchestra.
Yeah, this year we had a couple interesting creative ideas, at least for retention and things like that. We have our, almost everyone has the elementary to middle school transition, and also the middle to high school transition. So that's kind of what we worked on tackling. Over at the high school, we I'm sure you all know what Flipgrid is, but if you don't, it's a 15 to 30 second video. It could be all the way to 10 minutes. But we had them. Why do you love band, or why did you continue into band in high school? That's kind of how we tackled that, because it had the double-edged kind of way of making the high school students remember, oh yeah, this is why I did it. This is why I still do this, because as crazy as this year is, I think that reminder really helped them out. What my orchestra colleague did with the elementary was really cool. I think numbers are lower everywhere for the elementary enrollment, but to try to maintain as many of those kids as possible, we finagled the district into letting just 4 kids, instead of maybe a whole chamber ensemble or something, go to the elementary schools to just do a quick little performance, just these little kind of things. And I thought that was so creative. If you think about it in a choir aspect, for instance, maybe find a Broadway or a musical tune or something and send that to the schools, have them listen to something fun that they can, that you can tackle those transition points with, so it's about thinking outside the box this year. It really is.
Brad, you're on mute.
Do we have a question from the chat that we could grab?
Brad, we don't yet have an explicit question, but there was a comment a ways back about the be part of the music. Jackie, I believe you may have been the one to put that in there. And I was going to paste in, they have created something they're calling the retention roadmap. Brad, I believe you attended that same webinar I did. They presented a tool. So if you're somebody who likes organizational tools and you like strategy and a place to organize your thoughts, this might be for you. If that's not how you roll, this might not be for you. But I'm just going to add the direct link where you could sign up if that's something you might be interested in. Scott Lang has worked to put this out through Be Part of the Music. And then Jackie, you had commented on Be Part of the Music. Was there something about them specifically you might want to add?
That sounded great. All the resources were free. I'll add that.
Yeah. And so it's going to be a rough link, but it gets you to the page where you can sign up to get access to the resource we're describing.
And it was very much of a step-by-step strategy on how to, I think they called it, get back 30% in 30 days. It had kind of a hook to it. So that's something I'd like to just throw out as a general advocacy tenet. And that is, it's very, very important for each teacher. I've got a few other advanced questions to read, especially if you're in a smaller place and maybe with a small music staff. You need to recruit and identify allies, and allies in music education that are behind what you are asking the students to learn. This could be parents, it could be the students themselves, it could also be community members, but allies is a really important point, because there will be times, especially if things go south in a bad way, that you as a teacher can't always address certain things because you'll be looked at as trying to save your job. Whereas a group of advocacy members and allies can address that. So that's an important point. Katie, you said you had an idea for this. Here's a question. Do you have a strategic plan for the next 3 years? It will take a minimum of 3 years to get back to where we were before COVID. That's a question that came.
Yeah, so we actually just met with our admin, both middle school and high school, a couple weeks ago, and I made a spreadsheet of enrollment in all the middle school bands 6 through 8 since I started in Toma. And I also made a document of here's all the kids who were in band last year, here's all the kids who have dropped over the summer, and here's all the kids who've dropped since the school year started. And there's some pretty eye-opening numbers. And just by sending that to the admin, they understood this isn't normal. Like the numbers that I started with, or that we started with last year, 6th grade was about 84 students. And this year we're down to 50, maybe on a good day. So just being able to show them the trend of numbers, this is not normal. We've consistently had these numbers and now suddenly we're down here. This is not normal. And when I sent this to the principals, the high school principal, his immediate response was, oh, you'll bounce back. I'm not worried about it. So hopefully your admin will have a positive response if you can show them some data, some hard numbers. And then other things that we've been thinking about specifically in Toma are, this is what the expectations are of us normally. We're going to have 3 concerts every year. We're going to have marching band. We're going to have pep band. And we know that some of those might have to look a little bit different. So this goes right along with what both Will was saying and with what Allison was saying. Be proactive and bring your admin a solution. Don't just sit around and wait for them to say, well, what are you going to do about marching band? Come up with a solution. So here's just an example of something we've been tossing around in Toma. Kids have been playing indoors for 20 minutes once a week. So their skills are not progressing at the rate that we're used to. And on the trend that we are, there's no way that the 6th grade band this year will be ready to perform in a marching scenario next year. But I think it's still important for those kids to try and have a marching band experience because that's what they're used to. That's what the community expects. So I've been tossing around ideas with my colleagues. Hey, what do you think about maybe combining the 7th and 8th grade bands with the high school band? What if they just perform at band night where they're on the halftime, they're on the football field, they perform for halftime, then there's no real marching involved. They just kind of march onto the field, they play, they're done, they still get a marching experience. But if I have to make them march in a parade and play at the same time, I know they're not going to be successful. I don't want them to be unsuccessful. I don't want them to embarrass themselves. Or what would be the harm in having just the 8th graders march in a parade setting and combine them with the high school band just for one parade? So they've gotten the parade experience, but they're not necessarily going to be in a scenario where they don't feel good about their performance. It's not something I would ever suggest in a normal year. Normally the 7th and 8th grade band would march in a parade, 2 parades, and they'd be fine and they do a great job. But considering the circumstances, if we want to do the same things we've always done, which frankly, I think the community and the administrators still expect us to do, you might have to come up with some extremely creative solutions to still make parts of them work. And then just notify your admin in advance. I brought this up at our admin meeting. I was like, hey, just so you know, if marching band is going to be a thing, here are the things that I want you to start thinking about. It might have to look different. Here's why. We have a couple ideas in mind, just to plant the seed of, this is going to look different. I need you to be prepared for this, but here's some solutions. Sorry, Layla, what were you going to say?
Oh, that's fine. I'm sorry. The visual of this is so not so great when I'm waving my hand and you're trying to finish. I just wanted to say, Katie, that your enthusiasm and your obvious, wonderful attachment to your students and what you're doing is really great. I just would like to suggest that whatever is going to be normal now probably isn't going to be the old normal. And I think that's a wonderful thing in a lot of ways. So when you're thinking about writing curriculum and you're thinking about a 3-year plan and you're thinking about what is it that kids really engaged with when we were virtual or when we were in smaller cohorts or whatever, why can't that continue? And why doesn't that attach just as well to the academic study of music? I mean, I think, although I'm not in the classroom anymore, that there's a lot of respect out there for what music teachers bring to the table. I don't think that we need to feel that our expertise is not respected. You are the educators in the room, and that's no matter who you're talking to, if it's parents or admin or whatever. If you explain why you think something is of value for kids, I think they'll come along. And I understand that can take a while. So I like that idea of a 3-year plan, but bringing back some of what this pandemic, offered to us doesn't mean we're going to lose everything that was before. But I do think there will be a new normal. I do think we'll be more tuned into what kids' emotional and affective needs are. I do think that we will be more aware of their individual learning and how they progress, and not so tied to the band, the orchestra, the choir. And maybe for orchestra teachers, maybe I'm speaking with that hat, because for orchestra teachers, we've always had to be concerned about numbers. We've always had to line up all our numbers and see what the trends are. So in case we had to argue a point, we were ready. And we don't really do that so much anymore, because I think now it's accepted. And frankly, all we're going to have to do next year with our students is walk in the room with a mask on and play. I know it's kind of funny, but I still think the value in what you're doing, what you're all doing, is in the academic study, is in how exciting and creative you can be in getting each kid involved in what they're doing. They're not going to go home and complain about that. And it might be in marching band. They may be designing the drill. They may be making the flags. I've done a few of those in my life. and they may be creating the visual, whatever, but it's going to be different. I think you're right. And I think it's going to be great.
May I ask?
Brad, can I just jump in with one other suggestion there?
Sure.
I know that we're going to this spring, the kids don't know it yet, they'll find out in a couple of weeks, that we're going to offer an evening of just an optional virtual gathering with our high school students to talk about what's gone well. What would you like to see retained that we have picked up during COVID? And how do you see that sort of meshing with the things that are really valuable from what you used to do that you want to hang on to? And to let them help drive some of that discussion and planning about things that they find of value. And, we'll have to, as the educator, sort of balance that together, but to give the students a chance to say, there are some parts of this COVID learning, some units we've put together that they've really kind of gotten a hold of and enjoyed doing as a new way of experiencing music. So, I think particularly at the high school level, but I don't know why not at the middle school if it's structured right.
I was just going to ask, bouncing off of Katie said something earlier about showing numbers and the history. Holly, this is what you had talked about during your talk of a music educator coming with a history of enrollment would allow you to see how drastically the pandemic has hit that group of students. Is that what you were getting at?
That was part of what I'm getting at. And I think just in general, administrators like data. We like to look at the information and be able to defend things, because when people come at us from all directions, we like to be able to have something factual to combat that conversation. So the more data you can provide, I think that 3-year plan is a great idea, and looking how pandemic is different than other years will be exceptionally valuable information for your administrators to have.
Great. I've got another question to read, and it's very COVID specific. Playing instruments and singing are not even allowed in the elementary and middle schools where I teach, but it is allowed at the high school. With the exception of the high school, music is relegated to an extra activity done virtually outside normal school hours. How can we go about showing administrators that music can be taught safely in the building during the school day? This kind of goes to you a little bit, Laurie.
You know, the talk I gave earlier was just this really high level information, but the call I get the most, actually, most often, and it's now almost daily, is schools and places where they want to get back to playing, but they're afraid or want to get back safely, or there's pressure to get back safely. And I want to share a conversation I had recently with a school district where the situation was that a parent had gone sort of around the music staff to like school board members and administration, demanding playing and singing happen. I want to just remind you all that curriculum should drive, your expertise should drive whether kids are playing and singing as much as safety, right? And all of the safety protocols in place, every one of you work in a school building that has a different size, a different configuration. You're in a different county, perhaps, with different local and tribal health departments. You need to be at the center of that conversation. It should really be focused on how do we do it safely, given all the factors that we have in our place. And Holly, I just love that you keep driving back home that idea of data and what's that data to support what you can do, but it should be grounded in curriculum, because at the end of the day, playing and singing are actions we take within music education. It's one way we express ourselves musically, but there are also a whole host of things you can do if you're not playing or singing. I think it comes down to relationships. It's the relationship that the music educator has with the students at the center and having voice, the relationship that you and the students have with your administration and with families. And so I'm not answering it necessarily from that COVID mitigation strategy, because often when I get to the bottom of why people are calling, it's that they're wanting to play and sing. And I can answer that from a pure, like, scientific, what does that aerosol study say? But you need to remember that you are the expert, and it is the curriculum that should drive whether you're playing or singing. And if you want to get back to that, then you need to go to your administrator with the science and the information about what types of, work you need to do around ventilation and making sure your HVAC systems are working. It's all around the data. And then look to schools where it has been done safely. There are schools where it is being done as safely as any other content area is. And so look to models. And if you need support with that, we can point you towards those schools and those places where, through data-driven decision-making and using the data of the space in place, you can get to what it is you're trying to get to. But stay in that space of, it should be the curricular goals you have for your students really driving that, versus trying to get back so fast to the playing and singing that you skip over that, because that's where I think long-term we won't recover as quickly if we skip that part. I'll ask if any other panelists have anything to add or reflect on from that response I gave.
Laurie, I actually thought about this question quite a bit ahead of time and wholeheartedly agree with everything that you're saying. And in the districts where it's been successful, they've done just that. What can we focus on that's not playing and singing to start, that is still part of our music curriculum? And the other thing I would add to that is start small. Could we just do kindergarten music? could we just do grade 3 music and see how it goes and see if we can test it? It's not an all or nothing conversation. And I think administrators are far more apt to agree to say, all right, let's try it in one school in one grade level for 3 weeks and then come back and assess and then see if we can grow from there.
I'm typing in COVID-19 talking points for your administrators. That's on the site and it's excellent.
So I may be an exception. I don't know. My superintendent is relatively open to, doing things in person a little bit. I guess the thing he told me that I took away from a meeting I had with him is he said, Justin, any decision you make is going to be inviting scrutiny, and I think some people are afraid of, parent emails at a certain point. They will happen. But you are the experts in this, you have the data and everything. So if you think that it's safe, yeah, you're going to be inviting scrutiny, but you also have a chance to educate those same people at the same time. I just loved, it almost felt like he gave me a pass when he said that, to me, any decision you make will invite scrutiny, because it will. But as long as everyone's on the same page and the data is driving it, I don't know. That's my 2 cents on that.
I've got another question I'd like to throw out. Will said he would field this, but everybody kick in. What is your best hook for students that gave up over quarantine?
I really put my name on that?
Yeah, you did.
Jeez, that was dumb. Well, our best hook, and it's the one that we all have, is our students are our best advocates. If you ever want somebody to speak highly about your program, ask a student to do so. And they are much more eloquent than we are because they're not afraid. They're willing to sort of speak that truth. So I know that we'll have students do some sort of short advocacy messages that will be geared to go to colleagues who maybe have been involved in the past and have not chosen to continue as of right now, the thing we're all dealing with. Not as like a one-to-one so much. We don't want to identify those kids and sort of pick on them, but to say, if you were to speak to your friends who used to be in band and would offer a word of encouragement, what would you say to them? And use that as a basis to move forward.
Okay. I think I'd like to move on at this point to the next slide, and we'll cover a couple points, and then we have one more poll for you to do. What you can do now, and this is taken from a new campaign that NAFME and NAM is doing, and I'll let these float in. The talking points page, which you're going to see in just a moment, is great. Here, we could just look at it for just a moment. Schools and communities that recognize the value of music and arts education in 21-22 should ensure music and arts education classrooms, funding, all art forms, curriculum and scheduling designed to address learning loss. Music and arts educators continue to be teaching. Okay, next slide. Professional development. Facilities built and furnished for music and arts-based learning should be used for that purpose. Music and arts educator evaluation is completed in the larger context. Okay. This is this new campaign that NAFME is involved in and NAM is, and it's very good. It's full of great resources. So if you haven't seen that, Laurie and Paul, if you want to chime in, please do.
Brad, I just wanted to speak to the town hall meeting that's coming up.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So on February 23rd, from 4 to 5 p.m. Central, I'm going to put the link to it in the chat right now. NAFME is holding a town hall meeting where they'll be giving more information specific to the campaign that Brad just started to reference. And if you want to learn more about the campaign, the link is above that as well. But essentially, you have an opportunity both to sign your name to a pledge around the importance of arts education and a well-rounded education, but there's also a tool in there where you can write to your legislators, and it helps. It's like a self-guided tool so that you can get information out to those decision makers who it's most important for that to reach. And then more information will come at that town hall meeting if you're interested in attending. I had a recent meeting with Wisconsin Music Strong, and then also met with the state arts organizations of Wisconsin Art Educators Association, Wisconsin Dance Council, and they're all in for working together collectively and collaboratively across state arts organizations on making sure this campaign comes to life over the next 6 to 8 weeks in Wisconsin. So that'll also be something that we'll be working on here shortly, but it's definitely something you can navigate as a district, as an individual, as a team, and then also to join in the collective with everyone nationally. Paul and Brad, Layla, do you have anything to add to that?
Next slide, please. Okay, here's our third and final poll. Okay, if you want to show that poll result, looking pretty good. Paul, do you want to speak to that?
I do indeed. So as the current WMEA president, first off, I just want to say thank you to all of the members of this team who have been sharing their ideas, really great ideas that are being shared tonight. So thank you for that. I wanted to speak with my WMEA president's hat for just a second about the value of membership and why you'd want to be a member of this organization. And I want to frame that by just saying that as a member of the leadership team, like many of the people in this meeting, I have an opportunity to work with amazing music minds, as was shared earlier on in the presentation. There are so many great people working on behalf of music education for the sake of teachers, for the sake of students across the state. And it's just a pleasure to be a part of that group. So I put together some ideas about some of the value of membership in WMEA. And I want to start out by talking about sort of the two main thrusts of what WMEA is all about, and that is professional development and advocacy. So starting out with the professional development piece, the most obvious piece that comes to mind is our state music conference. And we had a very different conference this past October, with it being a virtual event, but still a successful event. We are really looking forward to our conference next October. The dates for that are the 27th through the 30th of October. And our conference theme this year is Music Education, Students at the Center. It is our hope and intent that we are going to be in person again this fall, and we are planning with that in mind. And I want to just highlight something that you should all know about. Our Wednesday evening event is going to be a new format this year. It's going to be called the President's Reception, and it's going to be a social event where we get together and have a chance to celebrate the fact that we are back together again. So please put that on your calendars and plan to join us on that Wednesday evening. So the conference obviously is a huge professional development piece. I can't speak for you, but I'll speak for me and say that is a rejuvenating experience every single year, and I'm always excited to be a part of that. We have workshops that go on as well. Our standards committee has some great workshops and events that go on. We often have an event going on early in the year, January, February, a couple of day workshop, and then there's also a summer event that goes on as well. This year we're looking at having a spread of different dates across multiple days, shorter events that will allow people to dig into the music standards and see how they can benefit students in our classrooms. And we have events going on at conference and things like that. The same is true for our comprehensive musicianship through performance. So we have workshops and events going on. We have one coming up in March, the 12th and 13th, which would be another great CMP event. There's also a summer workshop that goes on each year, and those are always very inspirational. But we have other professional development kinds of things going on. For example, our COVID action plan meetings that we had this past summer, while they might not seem like professional development, they in fact were getting ready for our school year ahead. And I hope that those of you who are participating in those sort of activities have found those to be valuable. We have our proactive advocacy summit like this, right? All of these great opportunities that way. Our advocacy is our other really big piece of what WMEA is about. And Brad has shown you a bunch of resources that are online. You've heard about the advocacy assistant team. We have conference sessions going on, and then we have a couple other big events that go on with advocacy as well. One of those is the Wisconsin Drive-In Day, where we have people advocating for the importance of music education with our state legislators, and that just went on this past week. It was a virtual event, and we had connections. Brad, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think we had 49 legislators that we connected with last week all across the state, which is
51.
fantastic. 51. Fantastic. Thank you. NAFME has a Hill Day. So we do the same sort of an event in Washington, D.C. That's a summer event. This year, it's going to be an online event, and it's going to be the NAFME Virtual Hill Month. And so we're going to be connecting with our members of the Senate and Assembly all across the month of March, coming right up, and doing virtual meetings with them. So we have some great things going on with advocacy as well, but there's lots more that WMEA is involved in. We have things like position statements on our webpage. So music education for all students, a new equity position statement. These are important statements that we can share with others about the value of music education. There's lots of materials online from our CMP committee, our standards committee, I Listen Wisconsin, great lesson plan ideas, and of course our advocacy resources you've seen tonight. We have mentoring opportunities. We have a brand new early career music teacher collaboration project. That's always a mouthful for me to spit out. But it's a great new mentoring opportunity to connect with our teachers who are in the early stages of their career. We have resources on our website related to COVID-19 and the most up-to-date studies and resources and ideas about that. We have Online Teaching Project, which is a place where teachers can share resources and ideas about teaching and learning. We have initiatives designed to help promote the next generation of music teachers, like aspiring music majors and dynamic futures. And then, of course, we have our social media presence as well, where people can share ideas, collaborate, all of that. We have a WMEA Facebook page, which is an open page accessible to all, and that's where we share our WMEA official business, so to speak. And then we also have a closed group as well, that people can become members of that closed group and share ideas, ask questions, and all of that. And those, again, those are great opportunities to connect with other people. So again, I want to say that we have a lot going on with WMEA, and we have a great group of people who are working on behalf of teachers and students for the value of music education. And so what I leave you with is that WMEA is doing a lot. We're doing all we can to really support you, but just like we need WMEA, WMEA needs all of us as well. The membership that we have, the conference attendance that we have, these are like our primary sources of income, and it's what allows us to do the support that we need to do for the sake of music education across the state. So thank you to all of you who are currently members. I'll hope that you will continue to renew your membership in the months ahead as those come due. Just a reminder, those are not auto-renew, right? So make sure that you manually go in and renew your membership. For those of you who aren't currently members, I'd ask you to strongly consider, please become a member of WMEA and support WMEA as our state music organization that is here to help you as teachers and the students that you serve. So with that, I will close that. Thanks much for the time, and we look forward to helping continue to grow music education in our state.
Thank you, Paul. Thank all of you for attending tonight, and a special thanks to our keynote speakers, Laurie Fellens, Holly Prast, and Layla Sonier. And thanks Will Jansen and Allison Yeager and Lizzie Chakowski for joining the little presentations as well. We are always available for contact through the WMEAmusic.org site. So we wish you a good evening and good rest of the week. And hopefully the school year, things are looking up for all of us. Thank you so much.
Hey panelists, before any of you sign off, it'd be nice to get a group photo, group screenshot, and I'd be happy to do that if that is acceptable to everybody.
And is someone saving the chat? I don't remember how that process works.
I'm going to be the last one out of the room to make sure everything gets closed down correctly. Teresa's going to pass me host status.
I was just going to ask about that. Somebody was concerned.
Yep. We'll make sure everything's captured before we close out.
Okay.
Can I grab a photo? Everybody good with that?
Yeah. Teresa, would you like to turn your camera on? Or do you want to leave your logo on?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Sorry.
All right, if you can make sure that you remember to look at the camera on your device rather than the screen, it will turn out much nicer. I'll say 1, 2, 3 and take a photo. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Gotcha.
Oh, do it again. Our dishwasher was showing. Sorry, I can't.
For the sake of Layla's
awesome.
dishwasher.
Brad's dishwasher.
Brad's dishwasher. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Gotcha.
Thanks, everyone.
Great job, everybody. That was fantastic.
I hope we got some information out. Thank you, everybody, for